Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. This is a particularly difficult topic for me to talk about because I'm criticizing my own, in a sense. I'm talking about media bias. I've been in the media for most of my life as part of my activities. I've been a columnist at The Atlantic. I've written a long series for the Washington Post, 20 essays for Time, 6 years as a columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle. I've written over 1,000 articles in Psychology Today, etc., 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 a total of over 3,000 articles. And yet, I am deeply concerned about the media. In fact, I think media bias is one of the most serious impediments to society growing I can think of. The problem is that, unlike in the days when I was growing up of Walter Cronkite, and even before I grew up, Edward R. Murrow, whose almost sacred responsibility was to present the full range of responsibly held views. In recent years, there has been a theory developed in journalism schools, universities, that says that because objectivity is impossible, we might as well acknowledge our biases, and that was a crack in the door that has since been opened to Grand Canyon widths, which has allowed journalism students, journalism graduates from these journalism schools to really just, without due caution, passionately feel their views and feel so certain that they're right, that they feel that it's worth abandoning the idea of truly making all attempts at being fair and balanced, presenting the full range of responsibly held positions in favor of advocacy journalism. And that has resulted in truly, and this is not my best attempt at non-hyperbole, but I profoundly believe that the censorship and censorship from the left is far deeper and more pervasive than the McCarthyism from the right that the left continues to harp on 75 years ago. And when indeed a free open marketplace of ideas is truncated, that results in lemming thinking in the public, more heat than light in discussing issues, and I think why we have seen so much virulence rather than thoughtful, respectful discussion with regard to gender issues, race issues, and of course, the presidency. I did not vote for Donald Trump, nor could I. I'm embarrassed by much of who he is, but not all of it. And so I believe that the best way to move the country and the world forward is truly a respectful, thoughtful exchange of ideas, because all wisdom does not reside left of center, although you couldn't tell that by looking at the mainstream media. Now, liberals will say, look at talk radio. But they only have a tiny mind share of the thought that goes on in this country compared to the ultimate source that ultimately weighted source, that is the New York Times, followed by CNN in terms of TV, and of course NBC, CBS, PBS, the LA Times, Washington Post, etc. Even, and it's well acknowledged, please Google it and look it up, even the Wall Street Journal, ostensibly considered conservative, their editorial board is agreed by broadly to be liberal in its bias. There really are strong arguments that can be made for more redistribution to society's have-nots, the poor, minorities, etc. But there are also strong arguments that can be made for allocating resources to those who have previously produced the most and likely to produce the most in the future. I know that's reductionistic to describe all of media bias in terms of that one factor, but it's remarkably robust. If you look at what percentage of the media reporting advocates giving more to the poor, whether it be the Muslims in this country or the immigrants from the Middle East to Europe, or domestically in terms of African Americans or the disabled, and even to women, it's overwhelming. It's amazing that one line can explain so much can summarize so much of media bias. So, what can I do? I'm going to talk to two audiences here very briefly. One is the consumer of the media. You and I both, even though I produce media, I host a radio show and I've written so much. But I'm also certainly a consumer of news. I urge is too strong. I encourage you to look for the relatively small number of media outlets that are right of center. The more responsible of them would include the Weekly Standard, Human Events, maybe the National Review, the American Spectator, and Reason, which has a libertarian slant, to balance against the much more easily obtained mainstream media outlets I described. And if perchance you are a member of the media, I invite you to perhaps pull back for a moment from the orthodoxy, the echo chamber that is both the world in which you've been trained and probably the world in which you live. Most journalists have spent relatively little time in the real world. They've gone from college to perhaps graduate school, journalism school, then into the media, which is this echo chamber, and then your friends and colleagues generally tend to be guilty of confirmation bias. You tend to be focusing on people who share your views. I invite you to pull back from that for just a minute and do some reading and thinking from people from another perspective. Say Christina Hoff Sommers about gender issues. She's at the American Enterprise Institute. Or Warren Farrell, or frankly me, about men's issues. Or Charles Krauthammer, a conservative but very intelligent spokesperson on Fox News. I think reading those things and then, just maybe, maybe I'm asking too much, try to have a conversation in which you welcome openly discussed views from right of center on race, gender, redistribution in general, corporations, their net good, their net ill, foreign policy that favors poor countries and has become quite anti-Israel, for example. And then ask yourself whether you are being fair to your readership, listenership, viewership by presenting such a truncated view of the issues of the day rather than the full range of responsibly held ideas. As you can tell, hopefully from the passion of my voice, I believe there are fewer things that are more important than the free, open exchange of ideas. And I guess that's all I need to say, or I feel I want to say. I've taken up too much of your time already. Anyway, I'm Marty Nemko. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.